Hello and welcome to my first soft-spoken video. I apologise for any noise outside. I feel like this is the best time for me to record. And hopefully this will help you relax and relax me in the meantime. This is the Hidden Life of Trees, the illustrated edition. It is well pictured. I'm sorry for if I seem nervous, but I hope I can help us relax and show you pictures in the meantime. I feel really close to nature and it helps me relax. I'll start with the introduction. Forests hide wonders we are only just beginning to explore. When I began my professional career as a forester, I knew about as much about the hidden life of trees as a butcher knows about the emotional life of animals. Because it was my job to look at hundreds of trees every day, spruce, beeches, oaks and pines, to assess their suitability for the lumber mill and their market value. My appreciation of trees was restricted to this narrow point of view. About 20 years ago, I began to organise survival training in the woods and log cabin tours for tourists. Then I added a place in the forest where people can be buried, as an alternative to traditional graveyards and an ancient forest preserve. In conservations with the many visitors who came, my view of the forest changed. Visitors were enchanted by crooked, gnarled trees that would previously have dismissed because of their low commercial value. Walking with my visitors, I learned to pay attention to more than just the quality of the tree's trunks. I began to notice bizarre root shapes, peculiar growth patterns, and mossy cushions on bark. Suddenly, I was aware of countless wonders I could hardly explain, even to myself. Life as a forester became exciting once again, and every day in the forest became a day of discovery. And here's a picture. With a few more pictures. Chapter 1. The Forest as Community. Friendships. One day I stumbled across a patch of strange-looking mossy tones in a preserve of old beech trees. Casting my mind back, I realised I had passed by them many times before without paying them any heed. But that day I stopped and bent down to take a good look. The stones were an unusual shape. They were gently curved with hollowed-out areas. Carefully I lifted the moss on one of the stones. What I found underneath was tree bark. So these were not stones after all, but old wood. I was surprised at how hard the stone was, because it usually takes only a few years for beechwood lying on damp ground to decompose. But what surprised me most was that I couldn't lift the wood. It was obviously attached to the ground in some way. I took out my pocket knife and carefully scraped away some of the bark until I got down to a greenish layer. Green? This colour is found only in chlorophyll, which makes new leaves green. Reserves of chlorophyll also stored in the trunks of living trees. That could mean only one thing: this piece of wood was still alive. I suddenly noticed that the remaining stones formed a distinct pattern. They were arranged in a circle with a diameter of about 5 feet. What I had stumbled upon were the gnarled remains of an enormous ancient tree stump. All that was left were vestiges of the outermost edge. The interior had completely rotted into humus long ago. Clear indication that the tree must have been felled at least 400 or 500 years earlier. But how could the remains have clung on to life for so long? It was clear that something must have been going on. This stump was getting assistance from neighbouring trees that were helping to keep it alive. If you look at roadside embankments, you might be able to see how trees connect with each other through their root systems. On these slopes, rain often washes away the soil, leaving the underground networks exposed. Scientists in the Harz Mountains in Germany have discovered that this really is a case of interdependence. and most individual trees of the same species growing in the same stand, connected to each other through their root systems. It appears that exchanging nutrients and helping neighbours in time of need is the rule. This leads to the conclusion that forests are superorganisms with interconnections, much like ant colonies. Of course, it makes sense to ask whether tree roots are simply wandering around aimlessly on the ground and connecting up when they happen to bump into roots of their own kind. Once connected, they have no choice but to exchange nutrients. They create what looks like a social network, but what they are experiencing is nothing more than a purely accidental give and take. In this scenario, chance encounters replace the more emotionally charged image of active support, or even chance encounters offer benefits for the forest ecosystem. But nature is more complicated than that. According to Massimo Maffei from the University of Turin, plants, and that includes trees, are perfectly capable of distinguishing their own roots from the roots of other species and even from the roots of related individuals. But why are trees such social beings? Why do they share food with others of their own species? And sometimes even go as far as to nourish their competitors. The reasons are the same as for human communities. The advantages to working together. A tree is not a forest on its own. A tree cannot establish a consistent local climate. It is at the mercy of wind and weather, but together, many trees create an ecosystem that moderates extremes of heat and cold, stores a great deal of water, and generates a great deal of humidity. And in this protected environment, trees can live to be very old. To get to this point, the community must remain intact, no matter what. If every tree were looking out only for itself, then quite a few of them would never reach old age. Regular fatalities would result in many large gaps in the tree canopy, which would make it easy for storms to get inside the forest and uproot up more trees. The heat of summer would reach the forest floor and dry it out. Every tree would suffer. Every tree, therefore, is valuable to the community, and we're keeping it around for as long as possible. There are different levels of membership. For example, most stumps rot away into humus and disappear within a couple of 100 years, which is not very long for a tree. Only a few individuals have kept alive over the centuries, like the mossy stones I've just described. What's the difference? Do tree societies have second-class citizens just like human societies? It seems they do, though the idea of class doesn't quite fit. It's rather the degree of connection, or maybe even affection. That decides how helpful a tree's colleagues will be. You can check this out for yourself simply by looking up into the forest canopy. The average tree grows its branches out until it encounters the branch tips of the neighbouring tree of the same height. It doesn't grow any wider because the air and better light in this space is already taken. However, it heavily reinforces the branches it has extended. So you get the impression that there's quite a shoving match going on up there. But a pair of true friends is careful right from the outset not to grow overly thick branches in each other's direction. The trees don't want to take anything away from each other, and so they develop sturdy branches only at the outer edges of their crowns. That is to say, only in the direction of non-friends. Such partners can be so tightly connected at the roots that they even die together. For this video, I will stop at Tree Talk at page 13, and then hopefully see you in the next video to continue. Goodbye.